Spousal caregiving is a little different than other caregiving because this is your life partner and your most intimate partner, your financial partner. And quite frequently, when one of the partners in this relationship becomes disabled, one of the first things we notice is sometimes you immediately lose half your income. It's usually two people working and one of the partners goes out because of disability. The other factor is this is your intimate partner. This is your marriage. It's not like caring for a parent or a child. This is your intimate partner in your marriage, and the disability may affect your intimate relations.
Did you know that in 2020, there were 53 million caregivers in the United States? And by 2025, this number is expected to grow to 62.5 million. 73% of these caregivers also have a job. They are called working caregivers, and they are invisible because they don't talk about their caregiving challenges. Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees, is a podcast that will show you how to support working caregivers. Join Selma Archer and Zack on the Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees podcast as they show you how to support working caregivers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our listeners from whenever and wherever you're listening from. We really do appreciate you. My name is Zack.
And I'm Selma Archer.
Hello, Selma. I don't know about you, but in New Jersey, it finally has become spring.
Awesome. Well, we got a lot of rain here.
Oh, okay.
Rain, but we need it. We're not complaining.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. California definitely could use some drenching without a doubt. How's that song go? It never rains in California. Oh, I'm not a singer.
Something like that.
Yeah. I don't want to keep our guests waiting any longer. We are just so excited to have Bob Mastrogiovanni with us today. Hello, Bob. How are you?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Bob.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. We're cutting into his baseball watching time right now, so we appreciate you taking a break from that. You could join us. He's a big baseball guy. But how can you not be in New Jersey and New York area, right? So Bob is in the New Jersey area, Philadelphia area. So Bob, tell us a little bit about where do you live, and tell us something kind of neat about the area you live in that maybe most listeners wouldn't know.
Well, I live in the best suburb of Philadelphia on the Jersey side.
So what's so good about it?
Oh, we have everything in Cherry Hill. Everything you need is here. And it's good educational system, and it's just a wonderful place to live. And we're only a few minutes from the big city, Philadelphia.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Shout out to my buddy in Deptford. Have you ever been to the restaurant Riverwinds in Deptford?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
That's my good buddy, Forty. You'll have to go in there and tell him, Zack, you might get a free drink. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I'll remember that.
And that's recorded, so now he's got to do it. So, Bob, let's get right into this. Selma and I, again, are very excited to meet you because we had never heard of an organization that you're a part of, which you lead, called Well Spouse. So we'll get into that in a minute. And that's focused on caregiver spouses, which we really haven't talked that much about. So we're really excited about that. But before we even go there, I know that you were a caregiver to your beloved and beautiful bride, Kathleen. And can you tell us a little bit about your caregiver journey?
Sure. A couple years before we were married, my wife had a variety of nonspecific symptoms. And then 2 years after we were married, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And in those days, it was very hard to diagnose. They had to wait and see what symptoms appeared. And then because we were married in 1968, so it took quite a while to get a diagnosis. For the first 25 years, she was relapsing, remitting, and she would rest when she needed to, but she was pretty much self-sufficient. But then she retired on disability when she could no longer work, and She required help at home. And I was working. I worked for the federal government. I worked for IRS in Philadelphia, and I had been there for many years. I retired after 34 years of service. She did very well up until the last 7 or 8 years of her life. She was bedridden, and that required full-time care. And I retired early to do that kind of care. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. First of all, congratulations on 34 years of service with the federal IRS.
Yeah.
Hopefully you didn't see any of my returns coming through. And
No.
But as we're approaching April 15th here, I just think we should thank you for the work that you did, because I know that cannot be an easy endeavor at all. Second of all, speaking of not an easy endeavor, being a spouse and helping to care for somebody that you're fully in love with, 50 years of marriage, is an incredible love story in itself, but also starting to see things not be so normal soon after you get married.
Right.
What was that like, and how did that impact your work?
When we got the diagnosis, we both said we were going to try to keep things as normal as we could, as long as we could, and we would make decisions accordingly. So when we bought this condo, we bought one all on one floor with no steps. When we had an opportunity, we traveled in the States because the States has the ADA. Can't go to Europe. There's all steps and cobblestones and everything in Europe. So we traveled in the United States, and we made our decisions based on trying to keep things as normal as possible, as long as possible. And we did a good job of that. We enjoyed quite a bit. We unfortunately didn't have an opportunity to have children, but we enjoyed our nieces and nephews and our extended family quite a bit. So she was quite happy, happy. She led a good life, and she was quite content.
Just one more follow-up question here, Bob. Before you retired, again, congratulations on your retirement, but before you did that, and not having children to kind of help you out, I mean, how did you manage having to go to appointments, having, and I know you probably got some help, but again,
Yes.
how easy or how hard is that to be still focused on your job day to day? I mean, can you just share? Because this is
I had wonderful caregivers, wonderful caregivers. One caregiver would come in the morning to help bathe her, dress her, feed her, and get her up and get her going. And once she was up and taken care of, I would get out to work. And then we had another caregiver that would come in the afternoon, make sure that she was taken care of in the afternoon. Then my employer was good enough to transfer me from Philadelphia to a smaller office here in Cherry Hill, where I spent the last 10 years of my career coming home every day at lunch, using my lunch hour to check on her and to make sure that she was cared for, and then getting back to work. So I always put my 8 hours in, but I was close enough to the home to do it. And, you know, you don't always get those opportunities.
Thank you for sharing your story with us, Bob.
So, Bob, I was wondering, as you were talking, I'm familiar with Cherry Hill. I used to work at ADP.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, beautiful area, just like you said.
Yes,
but I was wondering, in terms of your journey, how did you arrive at WellSpouse, and what is it that you do there? And have you had any experiences that you can share with people who are working caregivers?
Sure. I've been around 1992 or 3. I went to my first WellSpouse conference, and the conferences were in person, and we would all gather together, and we had speakers and we had entertainment, and it was really wonderful. A friend of mine stayed with my wife for the weekend while I was able to go to this conference. Then in the 90s, I set up a few conferences for them here in Cherry Hill at a local hotel, and I ran the conferences for a couple years. Shortly after that, I was asked to join the board, and I put them off until I retired. And when I retired, I joined the board in 2004, and I became the treasurer. And as the treasurer, I did all the things a treasurer does. And because I was with IRS, I filed the tax returns and that sort of thing. And then I became the president. And then I had a stint where I went back to treasurer. Then I went back to president. I am now co-president with Laurel Whitman, who's in Virginia.
Okay.
And Laurel handles the programming, and I handle the administration, the things that have to be done administratively.
Yes. So, and follow up, just a quick question. What would be the one thing you would say to our listeners about well spouse, someone that maybe is a caregiver for their spouse currently and is not familiar with what well spouse does?
Well, spousal caregiving is a little different than other caregiving because this is your life partner.
Yes.
And your most intimate partner and your financial partner and all of that. And quite frequently, when one of the partners in this relationship becomes disabled, one of the first things we notice is sometimes you immediately lose half your income because it's usually two people working and one of the partners goes out. It's either lost income or severely reduced because of disability. Yes. So financial factors are a big factor. The other factor is this is your intimate partner. This is your marriage. It's not like caring for a parent or a child. This is your intimate partner in your marriage, and the disability may affect your intimate relations. And in addition, then there's raising children and, your partner in all the decisions relative to raising the children. So it's quite impactful on the marriage. I highly recommend Well Spouse because Well Spouse is a place where you can find support in a positive way with other spouses, and you learn that you're not alone. You're going through this, and other people are going through it as well, or have already gone through it. And you learn from one another in those support groups. It's very, very important.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned that you heard about them in the early 90s. How did you hear about them?
Well, my wife was having difficulty adjusting to her loss of function, so I took her to a psychologist. To help her wrap her mind around the fact that she was losing her functions. And she didn't want to go in a wheelchair, and she didn't want, she was fighting it a little bit. Now, fighting it kept her going for 25 years, but now it was working against her. So I took her to a psychologist and we talked, and she said, well, yes, I definitely think you can benefit, speaking to my wife now, you could benefit from some therapy, and I'll set up some sessions and you come to the sessions. And she turned to me and said, and you have to join a support group.
I love Kathleen. May her memory be eternal. Oh my goodness, I love her.
So that's how it all started. And the therapist looked up Well Spouse, and at that time, the office was in New York. We're currently located in Freehold, New Jersey, which is sort of centrally located in New Jersey.
I'm so glad you shared that because Selma and I just did a podcast with Canadian Care Advocates, and one of them works for the University of Alberta, and they talked about how they're trying to improve the awareness and education of healthcare providers so that when they do see somebody that might be tired or they're caring for somebody, they can maybe give them some assistance like this therapist did for you guys. Because I'll be honest with you, most primary physicians and healthcare, they don't know where these resources are.
No, they're dealing with the disease. You have multiple
Yeah.
sclerosis. We're going to deal with that. The
Yes.
emotional end of it and all that, you have to find a way to deal with that yourself. And a support group is a great thing. And the companionship that you develop with your friends, you learn from them and you support one another. It's invaluable.
One other quick thing that you mentioned, you and I spoke earlier, Bob, and you mentioned to me that you did get to hear the great Governor Marty Schreiber, who's also been a fan of ours, or we're a fan of his, rather. And we've read his book, My Two Elaines.
Yes.
And shout out to Paul Wynn for introducing us to you, Bob. And so you've heard Governor Marty speak to you guys, right? Your
Yes,
organization?
he spoke to us at one of our conferences. He was one of our guest speakers, and he was wonderful.
Yeah.
Marty's a great guy.
So he talks about My Two Elaines. Did you experience that? My Two Kathleens? Did that help out? And
no, his wife had dementia. Now we're not disease specific. We cover all diseases. What's common is that it's the spouse. So he was dealing with dementia. I was dealing with MS, different diseases.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of commonality in that it's your life partner that you're losing.
Yeah. I mean, the things that you were bringing up are so important, intimacy, your life partner, finance. I mean, we just appreciate you sharing that. Just to just change gears real quick here. You mentioned that your employer was good enough and flexible enough to have you still work with them and move you to an area that was going to be convenient for you. And I love that.
Yeah, that was great. I really appreciated that because there was an office on the other side of Cherry Hill, which was a short drive from my house. And, I had to give up a little bit of my ambitions. I was a supervisor over there. Over here, I'm not a supervisor, but I'm a worker. And I spent the last 8 or 9 years working in the local office where I could put my 8 hours a day in, but by the same token, I was close enough to get home and get back on a moment's notice.
Hats off to our employer. Hats off to the IRS. I know that IRS sometimes gets negative connotations, but let's give it a positive one today. That was a grand move on their part. Do you have, in your experience personally, as well as with WellSpouse, do you have a couple of suggestions for our listeners who are employers? They are HR leaders. They are managers. Do you have a couple of suggestions for them on how they could be maybe more supportive, especially if they don't even know what caregiving is about?
Well, yes, they should learn. Their HR should definitely become educated on the issues facing caregivers today. Lillian Carter said, "You're either, I hope I get this right, you're either going to need care, you're going to give care, or she mentioned you're going to be a caregiver at some point in your life." And many of these people are still working. And when you're working, it's tough. It's tough. You've got the responsibilities from work, got the responsibilities from home, and you've got to balance the two. And the HR community should be educated on these issues. Like I said, I was given the opportunity to go to a smaller office. Philadelphia is a big city. It's a bigger situation. I gave up a little bit by going to the smaller office, but it was what I needed. A lot of times people have to forego their career in order to continue to caregive. And I was able to do both.
So just continuing with your journey, Bob,
yes.
you obviously had to come forward and have a conversation with your employer to have, that switch in your location happen.
Yes.
So, and some people are at least so far are not comfortable with that. But what do you think, what suggestions do you have for employees who are caregivers to get the support they need from their employers?
Well, it's not like you can keep it a secret long. If your caregiving is intense, it's going to show.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to demonstrate itself in one way or another, whether it be health insurance, medical claims, you're having to leave on a moment's notice, or, things like that. It's going to show. And I think it's better to be upfront about it than to try to hide it. Because if your employer has an HR department that is educated on these issues, they should realize, especially with the sandwich generation. Now we have some caregivers who are caregiving for a spouse and a parent at the same time.
Yep.
So it's important. It's very important.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
People are really struggling.
If you're doing a certain level of caregiving, intense caregiving, it's going to show. It's going to come out in some form or another. And I think it's better to be honest about it and deal with it rather than try to hide it. In my case, my employer had something called credit hours, where I could work 9 hours one day and bank an hour. And then if I needed to take that hour, it wouldn't count against me if I needed to take it later in the week or whatever. I think the credit hours, especially for the frequent doctor's appointments and that sort of thing, it was such a valuable tool to have credit hours to be able to go against. Now, they had rules. It was the federal government. They had rules. You could only accumulate so many, and you can only carry over so many. They had rules, but the rules were flexible enough to allow me to care for my wife.
That's great.
I love that. I love that.
That's
Credit
wonderful.
hours. That's kind of like the casual Fridays, right, Selma? When we used to have
Yes.
in corporate, that
Right.
work an extra hour a day for the 4 days and then take your half day
Yeah.
off on Friday,
Yeah.
which is really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
We'll just close up with this one, Bob. You've already given us some great tips for employers. Get HR involved, get them to educate. I love that. That's a great suggestion that Selma and I are trying to do. Actually, work with HR departments so that we can educate and raise their awareness and ability to empathize. And then you got some great tips for working caregivers. Sooner or later it's going to show. That's so true. So true, Bob. We can only hide it for so long until, somebody said once, I think it was on our Canadian podcast, Selma, but somebody said caregivers don't identify as caregivers until they have burned out, and then it's almost too late.
Exactly.
Right?
That's very true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But the question that we like to close up with you, Bob, and again, thank you so much for your time, is what would you advise the younger Bob, before you jumped on his journey? Are there any tips that you would give young Bob? Not that you're older or that much older, but
Well, I guess the only thing I would attempt to spend more time with my family. We did as much as we could, but I think early on we were traveling and we were doing different things and everything. I would have spent more time with my immediate family so that they would have had a greater appreciation for where Kathy was heading, the direction she was heading in. They always saw her in a normal situation, and they really didn't get an appreciation for what it felt like heading for total disability. She was going to be totally disabled, and they didn't have an appreciation for it until she became totally disabled. Okay.
That's a great reflection, Bob. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was very vulnerable and an excellent reflection. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope your listeners get something from my presentation today. And I want to invite everyone to go to wellspouse.org wellspouse.org is our website. And on there, you can join or donate. You can learn all about us. Once you become a member, you get the members only pages, and you can look up back issues of our newsletter and things like that. I think we offer support groups around the country, and now a lot of them are on Zoom, so therefore you can join at a time that's convenient for you. And we have a calendar on the website. You can pick your date. We have an online chat forum. You can type in questions and people can respond. We have respite weekends where we gather. Now, there's one coming up in Wildwood, New Jersey, where we gather and spend the weekend together on a respite weekend. We have lovely dinners and we travel and we do a little sightseeing. And our seminars are coming up. We have quarterly seminars with Valerie McSorley is our coordinator for that. And we have a members publication, which is Mainstay, the newsletter that comes out quarterly. So we offer quite a bit. And as your Canadian friend said, usually they don't start looking until they're burned out and looking for something to relieve their burden. Yeah.
So just to clarify, Bob, Well Spouse is available not only to people who are currently caring for spouses, but also for people who have cared for spouses.
Yes, we have former well spouses who provide support for formers, and we're getting a lot of younger well spouses now, and we have a special group for younger well spouses, and we're trying to put together a military well spouse support group. So yes, we're trying to meet the needs of our members.
Hats off to you, Bob. You're a tremendous advocate, incredible spouse, incredible caregiver. We're honored.
Oh, thank you.
We're honored to have you. We really are. And thank you for your time. And Selma and I will do our part promoting your organization. And every once in a while, I like to throw a challenge out to our listeners. I'm going to do another one here, Selma. You ready? I'm going to challenge an organization that's listening in on Bob's great episode here today. And if you are really walking the talk, and if you want to create a culture of care, this is an excellent organization to donate towards. So that way you really are making a difference. I know I joined your organization. I'm not a caregiver spouse, but I joined your organization and happily donated towards it because I know that you need funding to get that message out, to educate.
Sure. So nonprofit doesn't mean free. We have expenses to run the website, to run the databases, to get the thank you letters out. We do have expenses. So nonprofit is not equal to free.
All right. So my challenge is out there, Bob. Hopefully an organization, somebody's going to pick up on that and be the first to do it, and they will let us know about it. And then we will promote you for doing such an excellent accomplishment as that. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Zack and Selma. It was so nice to meet you. I'm so glad to know about your organization, and anytime I can be of help, don't hesitate to call on me.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to catch new episodes of Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees podcast, every other Tuesday. Please also visit our website, invisibleemployeeadvocates.com, to subscribe to our newsletter, purchase our book, and learn more about how we can help you strengthen your workplace to become more supportive of working caregivers.